Toyota Hilux rear wheel bearing, very similar to all other rear wheel bearings. Anyway, we're going to jack the vehicle up. If you don't plan to change the oil, that is if the bearing is just a bit noisy and hasn't collapsed and there aren't metal shards in the oil, you just jack one side up quite high so that the oil doesn't dribble out when you pull the half shaft out, and that's what we're planning to do. So, jack the vehicle up, whip the wheel off, whip the brake drum off. That's the first things. 21mm wheel nuts and 2 8mm threaded bolts to draw the brake drum off. If your brake drum's worn, you may just have to slacken off the brake adjuster through the hole in the back plate. Before you forget, put a brake pipe clamp on the flexible pipe that leads to the back axle to prevent excessive fluid loss. And then, with a suitable flare nut wrench, undo the brake pipe nut on the wheel cylinder. Don't go at it hammer and tongs, be cautious because there has been many a brake pipe twisted off. So backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, and just make sure that nut is actually turning on the brake pipe. We're not going to go into the brakes on this video because we actually have a video dedicated to the rear brakes on this vehicle. So we've taken the handbrake cable off, for which we needed a 10mm socket for the screws on the back plate and a 12mm socket for the retaining screw on the spring. Don't mess about with chrome plated bi-hexagon sockets because they will slip. Get yourself some good old single hexagon sockets. Then there are 4 14mm headed axle flange bolts which hold the back plate onto the axle. Sensible people take the ABS sensor off, but we're not doing that, and as you can see we haven't disassembled the brakes either. We're just fitting the slide hammer straight onto the hub, and we're going to pull the thing off that way. There are a few tricks you can do. You can put the brake drum on backwards and hit it with a hammer. That's it. All the way. So we can hear that noisy bearing now. This is the ABS ring, which we don't want to damage. We have to get that retainer off, that retainer, and I do believe there's a circlip down there somewhere. Now you can do it in the press, but these are parts that are going to be replaced anyway, so the easiest way is with the grinder. We are going to grind this retaining ring off. It's quite easy. You grind away at it and then suddenly the metal changes colour, and that means it's got very thin near the shaft, because we don't want to damage the shaft, so that's when we stop. So when it starts changing colour, you know it's getting thin, and to back off a bit with the grinder. Soon be off now. Just pulling the ABS ring off with the slide hammer. Then there is a snap ring, for which you really do need snap ring pliers. I suppose you could do it without, which holds the bearing retaining ring on. Now this awkward cuss wouldn't fit in our press, and I do know that some people do them with hammers and manage, and some nasty people support the back plate and hit them there, but we're not nasty people. So we've come up with this contraption. It's a piece of tube with 2 angle irons welded on the end and a jack inside it which touches the end of the half shaft. So pump away, Joe. Nice and easy does it. So the contraption worked a treat, and we now just have to take the race out of the back plate and take the old seals off. Then we press the old bearing out of the back plate. Now you could possibly do it with a hammer, but I can tell you this bearing is jolly tight. We've got a few seals to replace, and before you go pulling out any old seals, do make sure that your new kit has all those seals, because not all kits are equal. There is an inner oil seal which I'm going to pull out with a slide hammer. Anything else would do. And there is a splash ring behind it which isn't in the kit, so I'm going to not damage that. That's the seal out. The splash ring stayed in, so that's just perfect, and the new seal goes in there. O-ring on the flange here to replace, so I'm just going to clean that off with a wire brush, and we're on our way towards putting the thing back together. I'm pressing the new bearing in. And pressing the shaft back into the new bearing, complete with its retaining ring. Now we replace the snap ring, and just note, when you put these retaining rings on, they have a chamfer on one side to guide them through the oil seals, so don't put them on the wrong way up. Then back in the press to replace the ABS ring and its retaining ring, which again has a chamfer and it goes chamfer side up. A little word of warning for when you're taking the ABS ring off. As you can see, it's actually more delicate than it looks. So have a bit of care with that thing, or you'll have to buy a new one. A handy little tip, a piece of scaffold pipe is just the right size to drive those components on. And a bit of flange seal around there, and we're ready to put the half shaft back in. So guide it down the centre of the hole, abiling the ABS sensor, and when you feel some resistance you waggle it through the bearing and onto the splines.